glowing hallway is a really cool art exhibit. But don't take my word for it.
This exhibit was totally cool.
And Michael Landy has a PhD.
I'm a professor of psychology and neuroscience at NYU.
Anyway, see for yourself.
What's interesting to me about this piece as a perceptual scientist is that it demonstrates things that I find fascinating about perception. That perception is always an interplay between information that you're getting immediately from your senses and prior knowledge that you use to interpret that information. And when those match, the system works really well.
And when they mismatch, you get a very confusing experience that a lot of people seem to enjoy. When the exhibition was in LA, it drew
somewhere between 17,000 and 25,000, but yeah, a bunch.
That's artist Julian Hoeber, and his relation to this work?
I made it.
Demon Hill, that's the name of the piece, is inspired by
this stock roadside attraction.
Specifically, gravitational mystery spots, billed as places where gravity doesn't behave normally.
You get nauseated and water runs uphill, and it was totally mind-blowing, and it infuriated me.
Because Julian started to wonder if these spots really were gravitational anomalies.
And all sense of reason said, no, that's absurd.
So he tried making one. And here is Roadside Attraction, translated for the New York art world.
The version that you see in New York reveals the entirety of the trick. It's a room that the interior is completely normal. It's 90-degree angles between the walls, 90-degree angles between the walls and the floors. And then that room is tipped so that it's basically setting on one point. It's a compound angle of about 20 degrees one way and 9 degrees the other way.
What happens when you walk into the room is that the senses you rely on every day to navigate the world
disagree with one another, and so they fight it out.
I felt seasick.
It is actually kind of disorienting.
Kids freak out. Kids love it, and for me, there's a lot of art historical reference, but you don't need any of that to experience the work. It's a very direct and very unsubtle experience.
It hits you at your core, kind of literally. Your vestibular system, your inner ear, is telling you that gravity is one way.
It's the prior knowledge interacting with sensory information from the room
that messes you up. And prior knowledge has a reputation for doing this.
We found that in our own experiments. If you give somebody a collection of lines and they're judging their orientation, you'll fall back on nature. If you walk around the world and take a whole bunch of photographs, and they can be pictures from Manhattan, in which case, obviously, lots of things are vertical and lots of things are horizontal because people build them that way. You go take a walk in the woods, trees are up and horizon lines are down, animals' legs are vertical, and so that if you take a collection of these measurements of orientations, you'll find the distribution will have a bias towards the cardinal orientations, vertical and horizontal, which means that if I show you an unreliable indication of orientation, you have this prior knowledge that most things you see are vertical and horizontal. So if I show something near vertical, you'll perceive it more vertical than it actually is. So now let's go back to the exhibit. Our prior knowledge that rooms agree with the gravitational vertical is something that is true for us most of our lives. And so when you put yourself in a situation where that's not true, this overwhelming prior evidence takes precedence.
Even when you know that the room is just tipped.
This question about why it's interesting is about revealing how the apparatus works. This is an experience you can't logic your way out of.
The fancy phrase people use is they're cognitively impenetrable. You can know that what you are perceiving is wrong, but you'll still perceive it that way.
You can call it a trick or you can call it an illusion, but it's completely transparent. It's not a trick. It's that depending on the context you're in, your entire experience of the world can be altered, not through fact or fiction, but position.
That is, our experience of the world depends not on what is true, but on what we perceive to be true. On the other hand, Michael Landy says, our perceptual system is usually on the mark.
Is it necessarily subjective? Well, it's inside you. That's kind of the definition of subjective. Is it veridical? Does it reflect what the world really is? Well, most of the time it's pretty close to veridical.